Good evening and welcome to another episode of What's So Funny, the show that probes the minds, the brains, and the psyches of the people who make the funny. You know, I hate to identify anyone as simply their father's kid, so I won't yet. First off, I'll tell you, Marion Grodin is an author, screenwriter, stand-up comic, and her own person, thank you very much. And that person has gone through some stuff in her life, from drug addiction to divorce to cancer. But she's through it all now and has written all about it in Standing Up, a memoir of a funny, not always life. I think that's the name of it. I hope she mentions it tonight. Lastly, I'll tell you, if you haven't figured it out already, that she's the daughter of actor Charles Grodin, one of my favorites. We talk about that, too, in a conversation I had with her a couple weeks back in her hotel room yet. Look out! Here is my talk with Marion Grodin. Let's do it indeed.
Tell me when
so
we're
to
on.
speak. We are on, Marion.
Is it on?
We're on.
Does it go out now?
No.
Or do you record it?
This is recorded.
Oh, okay. Hi,
Yeah.
Guy.
Hi, Marion.
How are you?
It's nice to finally meet you.
Yes, thanks for coming to my hotel suite at
Yeah.
the Robson.
Do you often invite strange men up to your hotel suite when you're on the road?
I have never done this before you. And one time, 30 years ago, in a hotel room in LA, which I regretted, if you know what I'm saying. And it sort of went in a direction that I don't see this going in because you're married and I have to get back to the States.
Right. And I have to pick up my child.
Yeah. Although I do love children. So that is not...
Do you?
Yeah, that's not an obstacle for me. But your wife, you know, it may be an obstacle for her. But I'm very glad that you came here because we had a wonderful talk. I was
You were in transit. Yeah, you were...
this whole month. I've never had a month like this. I've been on the road with my fabulous book, Standing Up, a memoir of a funny, not always life.
If you do say so yourself.
Yes. You know, here's the deal. This business, show business, is so impossibly hard that if you're not really going to be your own best cheerleader, you shouldn't even be in the business. Because, you know, my dad tells this story that I told yesterday on the fabulous TV show The Rush with the lovely, sexy Fiona in a very tight dress, that when he was starting out, he asked his agent, should I get headshots? And the agent said, sure, that way they'll know who it is they don't want. So because it's mostly about go away, you do really have to be a complete champion warrior for yourself.
Yeah, and you have to believe in your product, in yourself.
Well, that's why I say that about the book. I mean, I worked so exhaustively. I held nothing back. And everybody reading the book, you know, I've been to about 30 cities on this fabulous book tour. And everybody reading the book is just quelling, for you non-Jews, loving it. And, you know, and it means the world to me because I really gave it everything I have.
Well, I can't wait to read it. Now, you're on this book tour. You're planning
You notice how there was a pause there? Because I didn't realize you hadn't read it.
I hadn't read it.
I don't know if I'd be willing to have let you into my suite at the Robson, Guy, if I knew that you... What have you been reading, Guy? What have you been reading?
We in the press are used to be being given things. So that was like a little hint.
Oh, it hinges on that.
No, it doesn't.
Well,
I also purchase books.
You do purchase books. Well, you can get mine. You can actually download it. You can get a hard copy in the bookstores, although I went into Chapters. Is that and they only had a couple copies, so that was disappointing. And then over here you have Heather's Picks, and I'm told she's like the Oprah. So now I'm obsessed with finding Heather, but I don't even know if that's an actual person to get a better spot. There was a table that said inspirational books by women, and I thought Standing Up should be on that because it's hilarious, but it's very inspiring because I've been through a lot of rough stuff, and it's very much about, you know, perseverance and your own sort of spiritual fortitude, and along with laugh out loud crazy stuff.
Well, let's talk about some of your troubles.
All right, why not?
Or I read an interview with you where you said the book was twice as long when you first wrote it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, through editing process, it gets whittled down.
Yeah.
I want to hear some of the stuff that didn't make it into the book.
Well, it originally was 600 pages long, and it wasn't even about whittling it down. My editor basically shot me a look across her desk at Hachette Publishing in Midtown Manhattan in New York City. And just based on the look, the book was 300 pages shorter the next day. It was a look that said, you know, I know this is your own War and Peace, but it cannot be 600 pages long. And then, just as we were about to finalize the book, the last version, I had it in my trunk, and like many women, it was in there with Diet Pepsi, which exploded all over the book, and I had to peel the pages away from each other and blow dry them all over the floor while my cats, Fat Eddie and Miss Snuggles, who are heavily featured in the book, you know, walked on things and got their little paws stuck. But it's not about anything substantial being left out of the book, and all the real grit is in the book.
I see. So maybe each story was condensed more rather than stories being taken out fully.
You know, there may have been other stories, but truthfully, the crux, I mean, if somebody says, write your life story, it's just insanely daunting, because you think, what do I leave in and what do I leave out? And I have had an extremely, you know, rich, dramatic, hilarious, heartbreaking life in my 53 years. But all of the real stuff is in there. And I also hope that, and I know you're going to ask me about what that stuff is, but a lot of people have been through a lot of what I've been through. And I think what's great about the book is, you know, everybody tells me they cry, but they laugh their asses off too. And it's great to be able to approach subject matter like the loss of a parent, the loss of a marriage, breast cancer, you know, the loss of your health, early drug and alcohol addiction, so the loss of yourself. And the book is kind of about reclaiming your life. So to be able to ultimately have it be uplifting and huge cathartic laughter along the way, I think that's what's so great about it. So,
is it just cathartic laughter? I mean, you're a stand-up comic.
As opposed to what?
Well, you're a stand-up comic, and then there's just, you know, great written material and jokes that, you know, just stand on their own.
Right.
That it isn't there for the purpose of catharsis, or you're just saying that that's a reaction.
Well, I would argue that laughter is inherently cathartic.
Would you?
Because I think that it's such a kind of primal release that whether you're laughing at a well-scripted joke by someone like Jerry Seinfeld or a sort of grittier, more emotional piece, it's all cathartic in different ways on different levels. I think a lot of the stuff in the book is deeply cathartic because if you don't laugh about trauma in your life, you know, people ask me if you hadn't been able to laugh, I mean, I'd be dead. And again, I don't think I'm unique. I think a lot of us go through really rough stuff, but it's how you move through it. And for me, the power of connecting with other people, which is what this book seeks to do, and the power of laughter and identification is profound.
Some people don't laugh at their own misfortune, though.
Well, that's right. And a lot of people don't make it through. I mean, I'm clean and sober 25 years. And, you know, there are people that, you know, people die. I mean, people, the weight of their grief, you know, the weight of your grief can kill you in one form or another, whether it's that you weigh 400 pounds or you're dead or you hang yourself or you've got a needle in your arm. I mean, it's epidemic. There's, you know, the suicide rate is fairly high.
Yeah.
What an upbeat turn the interview has taken. Yeah.
Well, I mean, your laughter at a funeral.
Right.
There's no funnier laughter than when you're
at
a funeral.
Well, that's right. And it really is like scratching the itch of the thing that is hardest. So, you know, so many people have been through breast cancer, unfortunately. So many people have gone through divorce. I went through them at the same time, which was just horrendous. But there's lots of laughter and there's lots of spirit. And it's your life force that gets you through. And my life force, you know, you wrote this wonderful article and it says Grodin carries the dry gene. Grodin Jr. carries the dry gene. I'm blessed that, you know, I have now generations in my family have been blessed with laughter, being able to laugh and make other people laugh.
Yeah, generations.
I
heard your great-grandfather was a Talmudic scholar, and he saw the humor in the Talmud. Is that right?
That is exactly right.
Hey, have I done my research?
Yes, you have. Very impressive for your interview here at the Robson. Yeah, I found that out a couple years ago, and it makes perfect sense to me because I am definitely encoded for it. on both sides of my family. It's just the way I come to things. I'm very thin-skinned, so I'm hypersensitive, and that can be very hard for me. But the upside of that is that I'm very in touch with sort of all of the nuances and the places that comedy comes from,
Interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
your stand-up style, from what I've seen, is kind of in your face.
It is in your face.
And you say you're thin-skinned.
Yes, I'm not thin-assed, as you may have known. I've definitely put weight on during the trip, but I plan to be thinner-assed when I go home.
But I mean, you kind of, as I say, in your face.
Yes.
In stand-up, and that's to stop anyone from reaching you and hurting you. It's like, I'm right at you.
Well,
I know you told me earlier that you developed this style because of a heckler early in your career.
right. Well, I don't think
And
it's
that still sticks with you to this day, that exchange that you had.
Yes, I don't think it's only that. You've kind of opened up a good can of worms. I don't think it's only that. I think, all comics, do not want to get hurt on stage because you're so vulnerable, especially the way I do comedy, where it's not formulaic jokes. It's very autobiographical. It's very personal. It's very just kind of my psyche leaking all over the stage. And a lot of people describe it sort of as therapy. And so it's great. And it's very cathartic and it's very personal, but I am vulnerable because I do that. And so all comics are vulnerable, but I think women comics, more so than men, I think audiences sort of inherently entitle men to have a voice and to be up there and to be aggressive and in your face and opinionated and have a strong, dominant point of view. I think it has to be more earned by women because an audience doesn't immediately endow that to a woman. So if you're a forceful woman, it's interesting. Right away, you'd say, I'm in your face. But it's just interesting. If you were interviewing a man and he had the same style, I don't even know if you would characterize it as in your face because, I don't know if you would say Jay Okerson or David Tell we were just talking about. And I don't mean it as any criticism of you. I think it's so culturally embedded in the collective consciousness that men are allowed to be inappropriate and aggressive and ballsy and feisty, and that when women do it, it's you take note of it. But it's also very much something that a lot of women comics have because, we're going to make sure that we're in control up there.
Well, I probably said it because you do a lot of crowd work.
Yeah.
Right? And so
I'm very interactive.
And how much of that is insulting?
A lot of it.
A lot of it. This is where I got that from.
No, you're right. Well, I stand by what I'm saying, but I also agree that I am in your face. I agree. I think there are a number of factors with that. Judy Gold, the wonderful comedian Judy Gold, said to me two things that have always stayed with me deeply. She said, you've got to know who you are on stage. You must know who you are up there. And you have to let them know you're in control. And that's all I mean is that I think audiences more reflexively afford control to a male comic than to a woman. And I've had so many men come up to me after shows and say, and I know exactly what they're going to say the minute they approach me, I never thought, and I can do the rest, I never thought women were funny, and then I saw you and you're so funny. And so it's sort of a backhanded compliment, always followed by me saying, can I ask how many female comedians you've seen? And of course it's minute compared to the men. But look, I'm a Jewish girl who grew up in New York City in the 60s, going to public schools that were predominantly black and Hispanic, getting my ass kicked. So yeah, I'm definitely a tough kind of,
Yeah, the accent helps.
Oh, see, I think the accent, you have the accent.
Oh, come on, New
York
York
accent guy? Do I have one?
The New York accent.
Do I have one?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, I'm so happy.
Yeah. You don't think so?
Well, I don't hear it. I think I sound British.
Well, there is that, too.
I'm teasing you. I have not been out of the country since I was 19 and took my junior year abroad.
19? Where did you go?
Well, all of this is in the book because I was already a full-blown
Which I haven't read.
Drug addict, alcoholic. He hasn't read it because he wouldn't friggin' buy it because he's cheap. No, he's not. He'll read it. I'm going to read it to him actually after the podcast is
Perfect.
over. I'm going to force him to sit here and I'm going to read the entire book aloud on his lap. I'm going to sit on his lap. I took my junior year abroad. I was already a full-blown addict. And
By 19.
Correct. Well, I was a full-blown addict by 17.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's all in the book, but I'm clean and sober 25 years. Thank you, God. And I lived in London, and it's a whole part of the book. It was insane because I was active and out of control and constantly trying to get my father to wire me more money to support my drug habit. And
He didn't know what he was supporting.
He did not.
No.
He did not. In fact, it's been one of the sort of things I didn't see coming about the book, which is that there's actually stuff about my history, my drug history, that he didn't know. And now he knows because of the book. And he's written a couple articles that have gone out on the internet and different things where he's kind of talked about lamenting that he didn't know more about what was going on with me. But, you know, that's addiction. It's all secrecy.
What were you addicted to?
Name it. I mean, alcohol was my drug of choice. But a lot of things, cocaine, pot, you know, there was heroin in there was crack. I mean...
Wow. And how long did it last?
I hit a very profound, emotionally violent bottom when I was in my early-ish 20s and had I had delirium tremors, and I was hallucinating. And that lasted for a year and a half. So I got profoundly mentally ill from what I had done at a young age and really thought my life might be over, but I hung in there and started really working on a relationship with some kind of higher power because I was in so much darkness and so much trouble. And, you know, my mental health started, you know, stitch by stitch to heal, but I didn't know I was an addict with the disease of addiction. And so, as we say in the rooms of recovery, I changed seats on the Titanic and literally thought it was okay to smoke crack because it wasn't alcohol, and got with a guy who was a crackhead. And by day I was a sitcom writer for this show, It's a Living, and by night I was in a unitard at the Santa Monica Pier getting high. So
on crack.
Correct. So that's a whole other thing with addicts, is a whole double life. I would go, I mean, there's a funny, you know, there's all this, it's all in the book. The book, you know, did I mention it's great?
And what's the title?
Standing Up, a memoir of a funny, not always life. But, you know, there's all this stuff in the book about just sort of trying to inhabit dual identities and the search for who am I? You know, I grew up with a larger-than-life father and sort of felt that I inherited his celebrity, but I hadn't earned my own. And so the whole process of standing up in my own life, which is a lot of what the book is about. But, you know, I was going to dinner at his house on Sunday night. I showed up in a unitard, you know, which like outlines your body parts. And he said, are you going dancing? And I said, no. And he said, this is what you've opted to wear for Sunday dinner? And I said, yeah, why? And I was so on another planet that it didn't seem odd to me that I was wearing a sparkly silver unitard to Sunday dinner at 5.
And you weren't high?
Yeah,
oh,
I
you
was.
You were, okay.
I was either coming up or going down, or going to it or coming from it.
I mean, you know, I'm a complete straight arrow here, Marion, so this is all new to me. But tell me, so you were working on a sitcom during the day, so would you say you were a functioning crackhead?
Yeah, I mean, you know, yes, and there are a lot of us out there, you know.
Right.
I had, again, this dual life where I would put on my little barrettes and I'd go to work and I'd look like somebody from Little House on the Prairie. I've always looked much younger than I am, and it was all these guy writers, and then me, I was in my 20s. I looked like I was about 18 with this long hair held back by barrettes and sitting in the writer's room with 10 guys, you know, that were in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And then at night, you know, I found a get high buddy at my job. We'd go down to the pier and we'd hang out with our crackhead boyfriends and have sex and get high and, you know, all of this stuff.
Do you think, was it to have fun, just to get high, or were you escaping the fact that you were working on a lousy sitcom, or was it because you're a child of a celebrity? Have you analyzed it that far? Yeah,
only for the last, 25 years in therapy. sometimes twice a week, sometimes once a week.
Consider this therapy too.
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
and I
good.
appreciate you making a house call here to the Robson Suite in Vancouver. You know, I think that it is a disease, and it's, you know, I'm not the first person in my family to deal with this, and I write about that in the book. You know, my mother and I had a very complicated, phenomenal, difficult, loving, anguished, you know, completely deep relationship, and we drank together, and you know,
You were a kid.
no, you know, I
Oh.
was I was a teenager.
Underage, yeah.
I was a teenager, and I was getting high and drinking in my house. But, you know, it was the 60s and the early 70s and the 70s. And, you know, my mother was very bohemian. I mean, she was dating a Black Panther. One day his name was Bill. The next day his name was Quando Kinshasa. I mean, like, crazy stuff. You know, my dad was an actor. I mean, I, you know, grew up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan in the 60s and 70s. So I came from a pretty eclectic, progressive, bohemian, unconventional background. And so in answer to your question, there were probably a million factors as to why I was getting high that young. But the thing was, you know, by the time I got to college, there were people that were getting high and then they'd stop, right? And they'd like go write a paper. And I clearly was not in that group of people. I would get high, and at 4 a.m, you know, I would be literally like trolling the campus looking for more drugs and people who were up still getting high.
And you were living on campus, or were you living at home then?
I was living on campus. I went to Wesleyan in Middletown, Connecticut, which is sort of known for having more mental hospitals for its size than any city in
Really?
the country. And you could feel the psychiatric ambiance. Many people had bands. And then I soon became one of those people. You know what's crazy, Guy, about addiction? I literally overnight went from being this girl that was sexy and confident and sexual and wild and you know, that narcotic alcoholic confidence to hitting a bottom that was so devastating and denigrating that the next day I was a completely different girl. Like hallucinating in the isolation and despair of mental illness. You know, my shoulders hunched up to my ears because I was heavily medicated. So
And that lasted for about a year and a half.
it did.
Yeah.
But I didn't finally get clean and sober until my mother passed, because I was writing for another show, and I was living in LA, and I was on the phone with my mom, who I said I had been my drinking buddy, and she forgot my name. At the end of the phone call, I said, good night, Mommy, I love you. And she said, good night. And there was this pause, and I was completely aware that she didn't know my name. And my dad was out in LA probably filming a movie, and I said, something's very wrong. And he said, well, you should just go home. And we agreed. And I packed a suitcase, and I went home, and she was having seizures. And I thought it was alcohol related. And we took her to a doctor, and they said she should get an MRI of her head. And I said, why? And they said, well, we just, you know, we want to check. And I said, well, what do you mean? What would you be looking for? And they said a brain tumor. And I said, well, that's ridiculous. You know, I was in my 20s. I don't even know if I'd ever even heard anyone utter the words brain tumor. And a couple weeks later, found out that's what she had. And spent about a year and a half caring for her and living with her before she passed. And I got clean and sober after that, because I basically tried to kill myself after she died with drugs, and I couldn't get high enough not to feel the devastation of her being gone. And when the drugs stopped working, I said, oh my God, it was terrifying. And I ended up in a meeting. Yeah.
And that's what got you through it, the meeting.
Oh, yeah. I'm clean and sober 25 years and go to meetings and would not even contemplate trying to be on this planet without doing that.
So before your mom got sick, was she aware of your drug taking?
Yes.
Yeah. She was more okay with it?
No, my mother adored me, and she felt terrible for me. And I think that, you know, I can't diagnose somebody else's alcoholism, but we drank the way we drank, and we drank together, and I don't think that she on any conscious level knew how injurious that was to both of us. Mm-hmm. And when I hit a bottom, and this is all in the book, she'd come up to Wesleyan in her little red pickup truck, and I couldn't even get dressed. I was just a disaster. I can't even believe I made it through that semester. And she would help me get dressed and take me bowling. I mean, she was amazing. We adored each other. I mean, it's all these years later, and it's still horrendous.
You didn't sleep in your unitard.
I didn't sleep in my unitard. Now, where did that?
You said she would. You couldn't even get dressed.
Yes. Oh, good. Oh, a callback guy. I'm impressed. A callback from Straight Arrow Guy. Yeah, no, it was there are a lot of people who will listen to this who will identify or who will know somebody who has been down this road. And what I can say and is in the book is that, hope has to be held on to. But, they say spirituality is for people who have been to hell. Religion is for people who are afraid of it. I mean, that's a kind of little pithy statement, but I definitely went to hell.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Sounds terrifying, but
that's the right word.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very sick, and mental illness is very frightening, but I write about it in the book in ways that, I don't know, I just think make it very accessible, that landscape of mental illness, and I don't know a lot of things out there written about sort of the real interior world of somebody who's mentally ill and comes out of it. So that's a big piece of the book. And I was so grateful because I was well aware that I came to the other side of it, which is a miracle given the state I was in.
Yeah, what point is it terrifying? Not while you're in it. Is it as you're trying to beat it?
No, while you're in it. The mental illness, well, I knew I was crazy. I mean, I went from not seeing and hearing things to overnight hallucinating visually and auditorially. I'd be in my classes at Wesleyan and I'd see little bats flying around while I was trying to focus on my, African studies professor talking about some book we were reading. It was terrifying while I was in it. The mental illness that besieged me was very punitive and, very punishing and very dark. Yeah. I had a psychiatrist named Dr. Hedberg, of all things, that I would go visit when I was at Wesleyan and chain smoke Virginia Slims through the session. And every session say to him, am I going to get better? And he'd say, I don't know. I mean,
Wow, couldn't even lie to you.
No. So, but, it's all these years later and I haven't gotten high and I'm not interested in getting high, although last night, I did have a dream about a Hershey with almonds, which is another form of using that I struggle with.
Chocolate?
Food. Yeah, sure. That was my first drug of choice. Eric Clapton said that in an article. His first drug of choice was sugar.
I think I got that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty delicious one. But in my act and in the book, I find ways. People say to me, it's amazing. You write about all this incredibly deep stuff, and yet the book is completely hopeful and uplifting with tons of laughter, which is kind of the story of my life.
Do you speak to groups?
I think we're going to say, do you speak Farsi? Did you speak in tongues when you were mentally ill? Do I speak to groups?
Yeah, people trying to get through things.
That's a great question. I'm actually about to start going on a public speaking circuit.
Motivational.
Yes, because of the breast cancer and because of addiction, and there's so many people out there that, need to hear not only hope, but do it with laughter, which is, what my gift has really been. And what, the best people, I grew up listening to Lenny Bruce on my dad's albums and Richard Pryor. And, to me, the best comedy is people that can take the roughest stuff and find the humor and the release and the relief of laughing about it is unparalleled. It's just phenomenal.
I just watched Richard Pryor yesterday on The Partridge Family.
He was on The Partridge Family?
He was on an episode of The Partridge
You're
Family.
joking. What
No.
did he play? Did he play a partridge? Like a bird? What did he play?
He played a club owner in Detroit. Yeah, and The Partridge Family got, there was a booking mix-up, and they were sent there. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. He was just phenomenal.
Did you ever see any of these guys live? You're from New York. You're around show business.
I was too young to see Lenny.
Yeah.
But I grew up with my dad giving me all his albums, and one day, rainy day, I sat in my house and just listened to all of it and just, was just ensconced in his world and mind. And again, he was an addict. He was horrendously troubled and yet just brilliant. And again, really thin-skinned, really sensitive, so smart. And Richard Pryor, the boy I lost my virginity to, and that's a very juicy section of the book and hilarious. I didn't know what was happening to me during the encounter. I thought I might have to go to the ER, but you'll have to read it to see.
It wasn't Richard Pryor you're talking about.
My first boyfriend. Well, this boy had things in common with him, and that's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
But he
was on the Partridge Family too?
My first boyfriend?
Yeah.
He was not. No,
okay.
I'm speaking more in terms of I don't want to be too graphic, but I think you can yes.
Okay.
So he turned me on to Richard Pryor, and I thought, this is amazing. Like, this guy is telling the truth about the wildest stuff and making it like you can't stop laughing. And I knew, like, as a young teenager, I thought, that's what I want to do.
But it took you a while, didn't it?
Took me a long time.
Like, you didn't just go into comedy.
Well, a lot of my book also
20s.
is about living my life through default and not kind of making forward-moving choices and, sort of like, how I got married and how I did things professionally. It was a lot of like by default, and that's not any offense to my now ex-husbander, but I just I write about it in the book, and it's funny and it's heartbreaking just having so much ambivalence in my life. And I think now, at the ripe old age of 53, I'm clearer than ever about just what I want and how to try to do that, get that, and all of that. But stand-up for me was daunting. I had a father that was wildly successful as a comedy icon, and I was enamored of Lenny Bruce and Richard Pryor, so the bar was really high.
High because you share his name, too, Grodin.
Correct.
And we haven't even mentioned your father's Charles Grodin.
Yeah.
The great actor.
Yeah.
And hilarious person.
Yeah, genius.
And humanitarian.
Big humanitarian.
Yeah.
Spends a lot of time these days getting people out of prison. He's actually gotten a number of people out of prison that shouldn't have been there or shouldn't have been there for the length of their sentences. He's been very involved with the Innocence Project. Yeah, so
you share his name, and that's a little daunting going in where you feel people are just comparing you right away.
Well, I think what happened for me, and again, this is all in the book in stark, vulnerable light.
Standing Up,
a memoir of a funny, not always life.
Okay.
I think because my father was so famous, and I was so like in awe of him. A number of things happened. I think A, the bar was high in terms of what I thought I had to be, and B, I think that there's this phenomenon that when you're around a very famous person and you're connected to them as a little girl, you almost feel, and again, this issue of sort of by default, that you are in fact famous because through association. And so that was very confusing to me too. Like, wait a minute, when I go places with him, I'm treated like I'm royalty and I'm treated like I'm really special and there's this magic stardust on me. But it's because I'm connected to him. It's not because of anything I've done on my own.
So that's why you didn't progress forward, you're saying, is because you already had it. You were already a celebrity.
I think I never think anything is one thing. I think that was a huge factor. I think that I was really scared. I think that the bar was so high in my mind. I had a mother that was so talented, but a lot of her story was kind of, she was reclusive and kind of checked out in certain ways. And I think that, that was encoded into me too. And I don't say it as blame. It's just trying to sort of understand the landscape that you come from and how you're moving around in the world. But yeah, I think I felt entitled because, hey, Charles Grodin's my father. And I think I felt less than because, I haven't done anything and I'm scared, so I think there were a lot of factors. And again, when you come from somebody who is so phenomenal, it's hard as a little person to kind of embrace that you're going to have your own journey and you're going to stumble and fall and you're going to make your own mistakes. And I also, and this is very much in the book, the whole financial piece with me and my father was a mess, and it took us years to understand it mutually, that he gave me a lot of money and he supported me and he meant it to be supportive, but, unfortunately it enabled a lot of instincts in me that I didn't have to go get my own, or, I could check out if I was scared, or, it's this idea of the golden handcuffs. I have a couple of friends that have very sort of come from celebrity and are given money, and they're not being, they're not fully actualizing or going out into the world and failing and taking the rejection because they don't have to. And that's a part of anybody's journey in show business. But there were so many factors making me feel like I didn't really have to do that. And so this has all been great for me because you can only get your, it's God bless the child that has its own, it's, you can only get your own by doing your own road. You can't, I say in the book, I came to the realization that I couldn't ride someone else's coattails, that I would have to sort of wear my own coat, even if it had holes in it.
Yeah. And you eventually did it around
last Tuesday. I came into my own at 52 and a half.
Congratulations.
Yeah. No, I mean, definitely a late bloomer. But I've done
it. You're like in your 30s?
No, more recently. I mean, I wrote screenplays and I sold screenplays and I wrote sitcoms, but I was still not really inhabiting my own life. It's kind of like a chiropractic adjustment, like your back is out. My life was out. Myself was out. And not until my marriage ended and things with my father, kind of hit a place where we couldn't be enmeshed the way we were, and he couldn't support me the way he was, and it was bad for me, So it's really in the last handful of years, I would say it's really from about age 50 that I've more understood the business of standing up in my own life.
Now, what did Mom do?
Mom was a great actress.
Was she?
And she dated...
Film or theater?
Theater. She was beautiful, and she dated Gene Wilder and Dustin Hoffman before marrying my father. But, she didn't like the rejection. And my father tells the story that she went to an interview with an agent, and he said, "You're not conventionally pretty enough," which is ridiculous because she was gorgeous. And she wasn't for her. And then actually she went on to become a furniture maker. And I write about all of it in the book. She took a woodworking class and she was brilliant. And from that one class, she basically learned how to make furniture and started making and selling beautiful furniture, but, and she was macrobiotic. I mean, she was way ahead of her time. I say in the book, she didn't just dance to her own whatever drummer. She had a whole symphony. I mean, I've never met anyone like her to this day. She was such an original.
Wow. And she dated Dustin Hoffman, and your dad was considered for the role in The Graduate. I know that.
Yes, absolutely.
So, was that around the same time?
Yes, it's all sort of incestuous. I'm not sure about the timeline with that, but, my mother was I don't know, she was just a really soulful, sexy... my father and I talk about it, and this is, she passed a long time ago, that to this day, we've never met anyone like her.
Now, they split up. You were young?
Correct. My mother left when I was very little. But I grew up my whole life thinking my father had left, which formed this whole, landscape in my head that I had been abandoned and he had left, and it set up a lot of really unhealthy stuff with men. And not until my mother was actually dying did she divulge to me that she had left. And so the whole way that I grew up feeling about myself in a lot of ways was based on misinformation. So I thought he'd walked away from me, and I thought... And
did you resent him for that?
Well, I felt abandoned. I don't know that it really kind of congealed in my mind, this resentment. I felt, as all kids of divorce, I believe, do, a longing, just a sort of a bottomless longing for the parent who's not there. And it can set up a lot of unhealthy stuff in relationships with the opposite sex, because you transfer a lot of that unrequitedness into your romantic life. But it's just wild to me that it was one sentence, one piece of information, who it was that had left, and I didn't actually know the truth about my own story and history until I was, almost 30.
Do you know how old you were when they split?
I was like 3 or 4.
Yeah, I'm from around the same, and my mom left as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think it set anything up in you like that?
Well, I think I knew that she was the one who left.
You did know.
Yeah, I did know. So, no, I'm perfectly well adjusted.
Yeah,
Marion.
you seem phenomenal with your bright red sneakers. Yeah.
I love them.
So you knew that she left, but it's very hard, right? To know that mom just chose to leave.
Well, yeah, I don't delve too deep.
Okay.
Okay. That's the thing.
Okay.
Now,
Guy just shot me a hand signal that said, "You have spilled your guts, but all you're going to know about me is that I'm wearing bright red sneakers. So shut it down now, Chubby. Shut it down." And I respect that.
And that our parents split up at around the same age.
Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know if I mean, everything informs who you are as a person.
Right.
So I can't sit here and say, no, it didn't.
Right.
But I'm not sure what it did.
Right.
Now, what about your relationship? Were you seeing your father a lot growing up? Talking to him?
You know, I always adored my father, and I always had like that little girl crush on my dad. I mean, he is and was so wildly charismatic and magnetic and hilarious and brilliant, and so it was magical in a lot of ways. But I also say in the book it was like almost too much, because you have all these feelings for this dad that you adore, and it's overwhelming because they're not there, and you adore them and you want to be with them, and it's a lot for a little chubby Jewish girl in a big girl sailor ensemble, which is what I was wearing at 11. Outfitted by my grandmother, who had me in the big girl section. And why nautical attire, I don't know. We weren't anywhere near water. But, my relationship with my father, I mean, the one thing I'll say that's constant is that we love each other so much, and we support each other creatively so much. But, like a lot of people, it's been a complicated relationship. And I think that's the reality for a lot of us. I love him so much, and I know he loves me so much, and we both know we've made mistakes, and I mean, we're in a good place today, but we've gone through stuff, like a lot of daughters and fathers.
Sure, yeah. No, I don't know.
I
get the answer?
I love that you go, yeah, sure, after giving me a signal that meant I am revealing nothing, and now I spill my guts, and you're like, of course, we all go through it.
I didn't write a book.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And I do spill my guts in the book.
What's it called again?
It's called Standing Up, a memoir of a funny, not always life. And it's excellent, which you would know if you spent the money on my book and not those fakakta red sneakers.
Fakakta.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Do you cavell them?
Jewish? No, it's not like kvel. Fakakta means crazy, although I really like your sneakers.
Oh,
I'm just giving you crap. I like your sneakers.
They're a little bright.
They're aggressive. They're aggressive.
Are they?
Yeah, for this
That's
hour
not
in the Robson hotel room. No, but they're beautiful.
So, but I don't know if I got the answer that, did you see much of your dad growing up?
I did. But again, a lot of unrequitedness, because I would see him and it would be kind of magical. And I talk about this in the book, Standing Up, a memoir of a funny, not always life. He would take me to Elaine's, which was the show business haunt. And he had just gotten, on the map with the Heartbreak Kid. And when he was 37 years old and I was a little girl, and he would take me to these places, and there'd be Woody Allen and Paul Simon and, all of these famous people and these supermodels, Cheryl Tiegs. And I write about all this. And, then I'd go home and be with my mom and our complicatedness and dysfunction. And again, it's all in the book. And it was very hard to straddle these extremely different realities. I talk about it as being sort of bipolar, bicoastal, because I'd spend a lot of time with my dad on movie sets, and it was like fairy tale-y. And then I'd go back to my situation in the city, and it's not like, oh, poor me, but it was difficult and probably contributed to my getting high also, that it was very hard to kind of reconcile all these different feelings and realities and, being with my dad in some big, rich, fancy house and coming home to be with my mom and like begging her to, vacuum.
Cheryl Tiegs.
Oh, magnificent. She was magnificent.
She was beautiful.
Well, this is when you had real movie stars. Now it's like...
Well, she was a model, though. She wasn't in any...
No, but I'm
she
just talking...
act.
I'm talking... No, but I'm just talking about all the people that peppered the horizon. You know,
Right.
if I was out in the Hamptons or if I was at Elaine's in the city or this place called Gossman's Dock out in the Hamptons, and you would see these celebrities, and it was a very different time than it is now, where, I mean, Kim Kardashian.
Everyone's a celebrity.
Yeah, so it's like if you were a celebrity then, you were something.
It meant something.
Yeah, you had real movie stars, you know, like Burt Reynolds and Warren Beatty.
But you seeing them as a kid, you saw them as people.
No,
they were
really.
still the celebrities.
Oh, sure. I mean,
but you got to see them as people.
I did. I mean, my dad, when I was growing up, was very good friends with Simon and Garfunkel, and I spent a lot of time at their house.
He directed one of their
He did, and he
specials?
did that fabulous piece on Saturday Night Live that so many people remember, when he put on an Art Garfunkel wig and he pretended to sing Sounds of Silence, and then Artie came out and said, "Chuck, what do you? Please take the wig off." So I grew up around a lot of these people and on movie sets, but no, it was magic to me. I remember being at Paul Simon's house a lot and thinking, like, we eat a lot of sushi. There was a lot of sushi going on, and you know, it's like magical stuff. You know, you're around people that are so profoundly talented.
But when you see them as people, you can see how they really are, and that they aren't these elevated creatures up on stage. No, if you see them, you know.
Well, why? I'm not. But I'm not seeing them, like, you know, having diarrhea. I mean, you know, I'm not seeing them. I'm at their house.
Well, I would hope not.
But I'm seeing them. You know, I mean, if I'm on the set of Midnight Run, which I was with my dad, and I'm at dinner with Robert De Niro, or if I'm on the set of Heaven Can Wait, which I was, and I'm sitting there with Warren Beatty or Jeff Bridges and King Kong. No, you're still starry-eyed. I mean, these are celebrities, and they're really charismatic. And while you're seeing them off set, there's a reason that they're celebrities. I mean, they are very, very magnetic, compelling people. And like I say, it was back in the day when if you were a movie star, you were a movie star. It wasn't like everybody's in a movie. And I tell this story, one of my favorite stories in the book, about being on the set of King Kong and falling madly in love with Jeff Bridges. I mean, I'm like 12. My breastises had just come in overnight, just shocking, little Jewish girl. You know, you go to sleep one night, you're flat-chested. You wake up the next day, you've got these big Jewish, you know, look like they've been to a lot of starchy Shabbat dinners and Shiva calls. Jews out there will know what I'm talking about. Entrenched breasts, not nascent, up-swooping, optimistic little, you know, just arrived breasts. And I am fixated on Jeff Bridges and sitting in a movie trailer, you know, many days with my father and Jeff Bridges in my nautical attire and my stretch culottes. And who was there alongside me? Jessica Lange in her prime, who, I mean, was, and I write about all this in the book. I mean, she wasn't even like a human being. The level of her beauty was something that belonged to nature.
Right.
It was like something you would see when the sun set, you know, or the color of a sky as the sun went down. I mean, it was transcendent. It was magical. And I tell this story that, you know, my dad and I are driving along the Pacific Coast Highway, and he says, you know, you seem really down. What's going on? I'm like 12 and a half. And I said, I don't want to talk about it. And he said, well, what is it? You know, because you're going home tomorrow? Because the transition between my parents was always very difficult, as it is for most divorced kids of divorce. And I said, nah. And finally, he got it out of me. I said, you know, I'm in love with Jeff Bridges. And he said, honey, Jeff Bridges is a married man. I mean, he has a wife. He's a grown man. He has children. I said, what are you saying to me? I'm telling you, I'm in love with Jeff Bridges. And we drove a little further, and he said, what have you eaten today? And I said, what are you asking me? I'm in love with Jeff Bridges. And he said, no, I'm just wondering, did you have tuna? I know Grandma made tuna. I'm in love, Daddy. I'm in love. And we went, and he said, I think you're hungry. And I was outraged and so hurt. I was
mixing up your feelings.
Flying home the next day, and we went and we got a burger on the ocean at, I think it's called Moon Shadows. And at the end of the meal, he said, how you doing? And I said, I think I was hungry. So, you know, we've always had this great repartee. Yeah. And just my dad and I have always had just amazing chemistry. We're funny in a similar way. And, you know, we make each other laugh a lot. Always have.
Yeah. Midnight Run One of my
Unbelievable.
all-time favorite movies.
Yeah, so
and I
many
watched
people's-
it again recently, and it still stands
Oh,
up.
sure, and it always will. And he was brilliant in that, the litmus configuration test, and there was so much improv, and I think also improv he gave to De Niro, and it was just such an original movie. It was a very, very strange time in my life because my mother was so ill and actually dying during him making Midnight Run. And so, I write in the book, it was the best of times and worst of times because, it was so phenomenal that he was making that movie. And yet, it was such a horrible time because my mother was dying. And, my father also wanted to be there and couldn't be there, because he was making this movie. And so I flew to the set after she died, and I was just, very active with drugs, and flew home and hit my bottom with drugs a few weeks later. I actually did a reading with Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci and a lot of just, phenomenal actors. My dad had written a script called Home Run, and he was going to have a reading, and he invited me to play all the female characters. And it was just this huge opportunity. And there were going to be all these luminaries in the audience, people like Elaine May and Marlo Thomas and all these like New York heavy hitters. And it was a chance to really shine. And I was profoundly depressed. My mother had just died. My father had just gotten back from doing Midnight Run. And, I just said to myself, just don't get high before the reading.
So you knew enough to tell yourself that, at least, whether you could do it or follow through or not.
And I couldn't follow through. And so I actually went up into De Niro's bathroom down at his office in Tribeca. And while he was on the phone, I smoked a joint outside the window, and I came back down, and I'm sitting on a stage with a dozen other actors, and I am, blessed with the opportunity to play all the female parts in this very funny script and showcase what I can do. And I stunk. I was terrible because I was high. And so it just flattened me, and I read everything like I was reading an eye chart. And I talk about all of this in the book, that I just was not, I was using.
What did your dad say? Did he say you were terrible?
He would never say anything like that. I mean, he's too loving and generous a person, but he definitely, I caught his eye at one point during the reading, and again, I tell this story in the book, and he definitely looked at me as if I had been abducted. Like, where did my daughter go? Because I was bad, and, I was really talented, and I could have given all these different colors and inflections and nuances to these different female characters. And like I said, I could have been reading a grocery list: avocados, tomatoes, onions, milk. It was just terrible. And another thing with De Niro, which was my dad invited me to, it may have been De Niro's 50th birthday, and it was down at his Tribeca loft, and we were up on the roof where there was a full kitchen, and it was just star-studded with all these amazing New York actors. There was Harvey Keitel and Lorraine Bracco, and she had a little white dog, but I was high as hell, and I thought that everybody, I didn't know if it was a dog or everybody had white sweat. I couldn't figure out what was happening. I was really high on coke, and Madonna was sitting on Sean Penn's lap and telling this story. And at one point I found myself just standing next to De Niro with nobody else around, and I was high as hell, and it was his birthday, and we were just kind of looking out at all the rooftop activity of all these like amazingly talented people, and neither of us spoke for a while. And then he just turned to me and he said, "Your dad tells me you want to be a comedian, is that right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "That's what you should do." So a man of few words, but those four, that's what you should do. 4 or 5 words meant everything. And it's interesting because even in my self-violated state, even in I was in such bad shape, he could get that I was a funny girl. I'd been around him enough that even in my, really flatline state, he could get who I was.
And you took those words, and they really affected you. Is that why you had the courage to go and do it?
No, not because De Niro said that. It was something that was meant to be, I believe, for me. I think real comics don't choose it. It just really chooses you. It's who you are, not really what you do. And you kind of don't have a choice, for all the good, bad, and ugly that the stand-up comedy world has to offer you. But it meant a lot to me. And really what happened was I ended up going to work on my dad's show on MSNBC. And
As a producer?
Yeah, and I was on camera sometimes, but again, I was really very much not inhabiting my own light at all. I was kind of championing other people's bigness. And I tell a story about sitting in the studio and my dad interviewing Sarah Jessica Parker, who was around my age, who was like in full blossom of her own talent, and sitting there and clapping and listening and clapping in all the right places and thinking, what am I doing? Why aren't I in my own life in a different way? It's funny, I tell the story about, like, I would do these MOS, man on the street interviews, and it was at the time of the OJ murders, and I would go to Times Square with a camera crew, and I would walk up to people and put a big mic in their face and go, do you think he did it? Do you think OJ did it? And I thought, I can't ask one more person if they think OJ did it. And that's where the line in the book about, I realized I had to kind of not ride anyone's coattails, no matter how glistening they were, and be in my own coat, even if I felt like it had holes. And very shortly after that, I did stand-up comedy for the first time.
And you quit the show.
I did, which was not the most sober decision financially. And I also
But it was a sober decision?
Yeah. In the big,
otherwise?
Yes. Well, I was sober at that point. But I also stopped writing. And I don't know if that was the greatest thing to do. I quit writing screenplays. So it wasn't so smart financially, but I just had to take this leap of faith and start doing stand-up. And that was the first time I got on a stage, was about 20 years ago on the Upper West Side of Manhattan in New York City. And I went down to Stand Up New York on 78th and Broadway. You had to bring people to get up. And I brought my husband at the time and our two best friends. And I did 5 minutes, and I got huge laughs. And I ran to call my dad afterwards because he knew I was doing it and was so excited. And he said, how was it? And I said, well, I got big laughs, but I sure hope my experience of it changes. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I felt like I was having a heart attack the entire time. He goes, oh, yeah, that gets better. Mm-hmm. And it did eventually.
Yeah. And now you're completely comfortable on stage.
Yeah, it's I've been doing it long enough that I feel like myself up there. I was working one time with Dave Chappelle, and, he'd been doing it since he was 14, and I'm such a fan of his. And I said, what have you learned in all these years? What would you say to people that you've, learned? And he said, you get to a place where being on stage is real time, meaning it's not this different reality. It's a continuation of the reality that you're in. It's organic. It's like my dad would always say, when the director says action, you don't become this actor guy. And that's why, the best people, there's this truthfulness about it, because they're not some sort of contrived alternate version of themselves. They're themselves.
A lot of people bring up your dad, and, you were talking about being your own person. You ever just want to go, enough, enough.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, there'd be periods where we would be going through something, or we would have just had an argument or whatever, and, somebody would come up to me and go like, oh my God, someone just told me your father's Charles Grodin. I love Charles Grodin. It's like, you know what? Not right now. But sure, I mean, I think for anybody, growing up where the first beat of the way a person comes to you is through their being enamored of someone else is a hard thing.
But it gets them in the door, and then maybe you end up liking them.
Well, gets who in the door?
Well, it's an approach, and then you can realize whether you
no,
like
definitely.
Them or not.
And again, a lot of the time it's fine. It's just I do think, though, inherently the phenomenon of somebody addressing you and taking you in, but not really because they're coming at you through the filter of adoration for someone else, is a strange thing for anybody. I mean, if I meet you, Guy, and I'm like, oh my God, Guy, your father. And so, a lot of it is great and you're proud of the person and all of that. But as you struggle to find yourself and come into your own, it can also be tricky. And that is a lot of what the book is about finding my way to stand up in my own light, in my own life, whatever that is, with the rejection and the difficulty and all their feelings, all the feelings that come with a real life.
You perform as a headlining stand-up comic. Do you tour much? Did you?
I don't, and I should more. And one of the things this fantastic book tour has shown me is that I can do this. It's exhausting, but, I can do it. I'm a real homebody. I like to be home. I like to work New York clubs. I like to work in the tri-state area, kind of Connecticut and New Jersey and Long Island. But, that's a luxury that most of us don't have. And so, whenever a comic gets a gig, a television gig, one of the first things they always say is, oh, my God, I'm so grateful I get to be in one place and have, sort of a normal life,
right.
Because the road is hard. It's really hard. It's hard as you get older. It's hard as a woman and, all of that. But I've toured a lot with this book tour, this Jewish book tour, and it's been fantastic. And people's receptivity and love of the book has been very potent. And it's been amazing to go to, 20 different states in the last month and a half and meet people everywhere just loving the book and getting to do stand-up and connect with them one-on-one. So it's been a pretty nourishing experience.
And getting out of the country for the first time since you were 19.
I'm in better shape. I'm not drinking and drugging. I am eating too many potatoes, but that I will address. But yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I did this show here yesterday with Fiona Forbes, The Rush, and we had so much fun and, just meeting different people, different places. And also, it's very hard to get all the TV stuff you want in New York City. It's a national market. It's very competitive. So it's cool to go to different places and kind of do their local stuff and promote the book that way and get the word out. Yeah.
Well, you got to get out more. Come back.
I will. I need to go home and get some sleep, but I would love to come back. Vancouver has been very good to me and a lot of fun.
Now, Marion Grodin, I understand you wrote a book recently.
I did.
What's it called?
It's called Standing Up, a memoir of a funny, not always life, and it's fantastic.
And people can get that at Chapters. They can get it online, probably. They
yes,
can get it.
If you go to my website, MarionGrodin.com, there are 7 retailers, and you can download it to, here your Kindle is called Kobo. You can, the publicist just downloaded it.
I got one of those. Maybe I'll do that.
Yes, do it on your Kobo, or you can get it from Amazon, and you can get it in hardcover at Chapters, although I was in there yesterday to your big one, and I wish they had more of them and feature them better, but maybe you can go in and say, hey, you should have more books of Marion Grodin standing up. But yeah, you can definitely get it online, and check out my website, MarionGrodin.com. You can get it from there. There's a button to order it, and you can also see where I'll be performing. And I love people to friend me on Facebook, so if people are listening and they want to talk to me, they want to talk about the book or anything I've said during this interview, just friend request me on Facebook. I'm big on that.
I'll friend request you.
Okay, good.
And, I don't need to read the book now because I heard it all.
Well,
for the last hour.
I'm not sure if I agree with that. I would love you to get the book, but you did. This has been a fairly meaty interview.
It has, hasn't
yes,
it?
we covered a lot of ground.
But there's always more in a book form.
Well, I mean, there's tons of stuff we didn't cover in this, and also there's just, it took me 2 years to write, so it's
you got to be rewarded for that.
There's a lot of, yes, but also really what I'm thinking is there's so much detail and comedy and all of that, obviously, that is in the book and not in the interview. So get the book. It's fantastic. I have to tell you, the feedback from everybody reading it is kind of amazing. A lot of the feedback is I can't put it down. So, that's the biggest compliment you can get.
Okay, I'm going to go out and get it right now.
Okay, I believe you. In your red sneakers.
My red
run,
sneakers.
Guy, run.
Thanks, Marion.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks, Guy.
Did you enjoy that? Meaty interview with Marion Grodin. I did. Thanks to her for talking with me a couple weeks ago, and hope she does come back to Vancouver sometime, and we got lots more to talk about. And go get her book. Did you catch the name of it? Standing Up, a memoir of a funny, not always life. Marion Grodin. Next week is the last Sunday before Christmas. We will not have a guest in studio or recorded. Rather, I will come in and I'll play some Christmas comedy clips for you. And then the last Sunday of 2013, we got Harry Dupe, a great year-end guest. So talk to you then. Good night.